First of all, are you seeing an increase in hack attacks right now, whether it's because people are working from home or it's phishing or ransomware? And if so, how big an increase are you seeing?
Well, great to be here, and we absolutely are. If you look at any time where there's chaos in the world, we typically see attacks increase. And I couldn't think of a more chaotic time than now. We're certainly seeing increases in phishing attacks with lure documents that talk about COVID-19, that talk about potential cures, that talk about financial assistance. And we're also seeing ransomware. This is a time when we're most vulnerable. You think about our hospitals and governments to be attacked by ransomware. So we're seeing that across the board, and it's a time where people need to be vigilant and continue to monitor their security systems.
So, are you saying that from a cybersecurity perspective, we're more vulnerable than we've ever been in recent history?
Well, when we think about the vulnerability, most people are not home, and people are out of the office. And typically, what we've seen, prior to COVID-19, is that during the holiday season, when people are off, the attacks increase. This is the perfect opportunity for people to be out of the office, right, when no one's watching their systems, which is one of the reasons like why companies like CrowdStrike have continued to do well, because we provide that 24 by 7 monitoring as part of our overall security solution.
Now, the World Health Organization has reported that they've been targeted, and yet some of these hacker groups have promised they won't target hospital sites, testing centers, healthcare organizations. And yet, are you seeing that as well?
Well, I think it depends on the group. I mean, you have to look at the business they're in. There's no honor among thieves, right? So someone may say they won't target, and someone else will. I think you can't rely on someone's word who's trying to break in and extort you from a ransomware perspective, which is important to have the very best security technologies in place to stop these attacks. And a big part of that is using technologies that are powered by artificial intelligence to identify attacks that have never been seen before.
What about all of this video conferencing that's happening, whether it's Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts or FaceTime or House Party, any number of ways that folks are connecting, whether for home or for work? How protected are these conversations?
Well, when we think about these technologies, thank God they exist because they allow us to do what we're doing in a remote workforce. When we think about a remote user, and we've spent a bunch of time with our customers and actually provided some additional capabilities for them to protect their home users, as an example, there's risk because in a home user system, it's not monitored. But at the same time, you may be using that because you're forced to log into a company VPN, and you could potentially expose that network. So our customers have taken advantage of the Falcon for Home program that we've put together to protect those home users in a time of crisis.
Now, a point that's been raised is that some of these hackers, some of these bad actors could make their way in and then lie in wait for weeks, for months, and that we might not know they're there. How long will it be before we realize the full extent of the fallout here?
Well, it could be some time, and that's the problem with many corporate networks. They don't have really good visibility to understand how long the adversary is on their network. And, that's an area where it could be 90 days, 200 days before anyone actually discovers them, if they're lucky enough to discover them, which is, a big part of having good visibility across the network and endpoint technology. So, it's just a matter of time. We've seen organizations where we've responded to a potential breach. We weren't in there beforehand. They called us up and said, hey, help us out. And the adversary's been there for a year or 2 years in some cases. So it all depends on the organization, but I'm sure we're going to see some fallout from this over a period of time.
Meantime, because of the situation, you've got lawmakers pushing for more vote by mail and more mobile voting. And yet critics are saying we're just not ready for that, especially when it comes to something as important as an election. What do you think?
Well, at some point, we're going to be all electronic in terms of voting, and it's going to be a process as we work ourselves up to that. Maybe this is a way to accelerate it. I think we've seen various states have some challenges as they put that together. But I think over time, I think everyone ultimately over a number of years is going to move to all electronic voting. And it's critical that we actually have the security of those systems locked down so that they can't be manipulated by external parties or outside organizations, some of the nation state actors that are out there. So, from my perspective, at least for now, a vote in by mail is fine. I mean, we've done that for a long period of time, and I think in a chaotic situation that we have today, we're just going to have to go back to the old school methods and hopefully just get through it.
Meantime, we're already hearing, from intelligence sources that the Russians are trying to sow discord and disinformation as a result of the coronavirus to take advantage, as you said earlier, of the chaos. Are there any state actors that you are most or more concerned about at this point?
Well, I think at this point, we can all agree it's a worldwide pandemic. And whenever there's a worldwide incident, every government is interested in gaining intelligence information and understanding what's happening. If you think about the ability to understand what a country's doing, how they're going to respond, are there companies that actually have a cure for this disease? Are there technologies that can help lessen the impact? These are all things that countries want to understand, and they're going to be very, very active across the board in trying to identify and gather this information.
Meantime, George, we're getting more breaking headlines that, the U.S. is now poised to have the most coronavirus cases in the world. And obviously, the U.S., always a target. How much does this concern you, knowing that the United States still hasn't reached its full testing capacity, and President Trump is already talking about potentially reopening the economy in 2 weeks?
Well, I'm certainly not a doctor, and I just have to observe what's happening, and it's really a terrible situation that we're all in. I think, like everyone else, and everyone is just sympathetic to small businesses and people that are out of work. We're sympathetic to the impact of families, and we all want to get back to our lives, but we have to understand the risk this particular disease creates for everyone, and we just have to follow the right guidelines. So, from our standpoint at CrowdStrike, we put our employees all remote weeks ago. We've been fortunate enough to be able to operate as a remote company for many years since I started it. But many other organizations are not, and there's a huge economic impact. So, of course, we have to balance that impact with the health of all the people across the globe, and hopefully we can push through and we can get through this epidemic and get people back to health and back to work.